Michael Carter was not your typical CEO. Sure, he wore expensive suits to board meetings and signed off on million-dollar deals, but deep down, he always wondered what it felt like to be on the other side of his business empire. He owned a chain of popular cafeterias spread across the country, known for their quick service, affordable meals, and friendly staff. But Michael often questioned whether the reality matched the glossy image his marketing team promoted. Were customers truly happy? Did employees feel valued? To find answers, he decided to take an unusual step. He would go undercover as an ordinary worker in one of his busiest locations. The chosen location was a cafeteria nestled inside a bustling shopping mall. It was a hive of activity, serving hundreds of people every day, shoppers grabbing a quick bite, office workers refueling during lunch breaks, and families enjoying weekend outings. For this experiment, Michael traded his tailored suit for a simple uniform, a plain shirt, black pants, and a cap pulled low over his face. His new identity? Mike, a temporary worker hired to help with cafeteria duties. On his first morning, Michael arrived early, nervous yet excited. As he entered through the back door, he was greeted by the hum of activity. Staff members were already hard at work, prepping food, setting up counters, and organizing supplies. A supervisor handed him a tray and gave him a quick rundown of his responsibilities, clearing tables, wiping spills, and assisting wherever needed. "Don't worry, Mike," she said with a smile. "You'll get the hang of it." At first, everything seemed routine. Customers streamed in steadily, plates clattered, and laughter filled the air. Michael focused on his tasks, collecting used trays, stacking dishes, and cleaning tables. Despite the repetitive nature of the job, he found himself enjoying the rhythm of it all. There was something satisfying about contributing directly to the smooth operation of the cafeteria. The staff treated him kindly, though they were too busy to engage in lengthy conversations. Everyone moved with purpose, navigating the crowded space like seasoned professionals. But then, something caught Michael's attention. A man sitting alone at a corner table near the window. He looked to be in his late 50s, dressed casually, in jeans and a sweater. What stood out, however, was the struggle etched on his face. The man was trying to cut his steak, but his hands trembled slightly, making it difficult for him to manage the knife and fork. Each attempt ended in frustration, and he eventually set the utensils down, sighing heavily. Michael paused mid-task, his eyes fixed on the man. Surely someone from the staff would notice and offer assistance. After all, customer care was supposed to be a cornerstone of the company's values. Minutes ticked by, but no one approached the man. Servers hurried past him, balancing trays laden with food. Cashiers focused on ringing up orders, while others chatted among themselves during brief lulls. It was as if the man had become invisible. Michael couldn't believe what he was seeing. Back in the corporate office, he had championed slogans like "Customer satisfaction is our mission" and "Empathy drives success." Yet here, amidst the chaos of the cafeteria, those words felt hollow. He glanced around, hoping someone else would step in, but the staff remained oblivious. As the minutes dragged on, Michael grew increasingly uneasy. Should he intervene himself? If he did, would it expose his true identity? More importantly, would it make any difference if he simply acted as Mike, the temp? He wrestled with these questions, torn between staying undercover and doing what felt right. Finally, unable to ignore the situation any longer, Michael made his way to the man's table. Clutching a cloth napkin in one hand and forcing a casual smile, he said softly, "Hi there. Can I give you a hand with that?" The man looked up, startled at first, then visibly relieved. "Oh, thank you," he replied, his voice tinged with gratitude. "I recently had surgery and my hands aren't as steady as they used to be." Together, they managed to cut the steak into smaller, more manageable pieces. Michael chatted lightly, asking how the man was feeling and whether the rest of his meal was satisfactory. The man explained that he came to the cafeteria often because it reminded him of simpler times, but today's experience had been unexpectedly challenging. "It's nice to see someone paying attention," he added, giving Michael a warm smile. This brief interaction left Michael deeply moved. For the rest of the day, he observed the cafeteria with fresh eyes, not just the customers but also the staff. He noticed how overwhelmed everyone seemed, rushing from task to task without pausing to look beyond their immediate responsibilities. Empathy wasn't entirely absent. It was buried under layers of stress and systemic inefficiency. During a quieter moment, Michael struck up a conversation with a server named Lisa. She was in her mid-20s, energetic despite the long hours. When he mentioned the man at the corner table, Lisa shrugged apologetically. "We're so swamped most days that we barely have time to breathe, let alone notice every little thing," she admitted. "Don't get me wrong. We want to help, but sometimes it's just impossible." Her words resonated with Michael. He thought about the countless presentations he had given in boardrooms, extolling the importance of customer service and employee engagement. Yet here on the front lines, those ideals seemed disconnected from reality. The gap between policy and practice was wider than he had ever imagined. By the end of his shift, Michael's mind buzzed with thoughts. He had expected to learn something from this experiment, but nothing could have prepared him for the raw, unfiltered truth he encountered on his very first day. The man at the corner table wasn't just a random customer. He represented something bigger, a reminder that behind every transaction lay human stories, needs, and emotions, and it was up to the company, to him, to ensure those stories were heard and those needs met. As he clocked out and headed home, Michael knew this was only the beginning. The lessons he had learned that day would stay with him, shaping the way he approached leadership and decision-making in the days to come. Undercover or not, he realized that being a boss wasn't just about making profits. It was about creating a culture where both employees and customers felt seen, supported, and valued. The next morning, Michael returned to the cafeteria with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. He had spent the previous night replaying the events of his first day in his mind. The man at the corner table, the staff's indifference, Lisa's candid admission. It all weighed heavily on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was missing in the way the company operated. Today he resolved to pay closer attention, not just to what people did, but also to how they felt. As he stepped into the bustling kitchen area, the familiar chaos greeted him once again. Steam rose from pots on the stove, the clatter of dishes echoed through the room, and the air carried the mingling scents of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling fries. The supervisor handed him a tray and reminded him of his duties, clearing tables, wiping spills, and helping wherever needed. "You did good yesterday, Mike," she said with a quick nod before rushing off to oversee the breakfast prep. Michael nodded back, grateful for the small encouragement. But as he began his tasks, he noticed something unsettling. The same patterns from the previous day were already repeating themselves. Servers moved like clockwork, focusing solely on their assigned roles without pausing to observe the bigger picture. Conversations between staff members were brief and functional, lacking warmth or camaraderie. It was as if everyone had built invisible walls around themselves, shielding against the overwhelming demands of the job. By mid-morning, another incident occurred that further deepened Michael's unease. A young boy seated with his parents accidentally knocked over a glass of water. The liquid spilled across the table and dripped onto the floor. His parents quickly apologized and tried to clean it up, but the damage was done. Several customers slipped on the wet surface, some narrowly avoiding injury. One woman even raised her voice, demanding to speak to a manager. The staff scrambled to address the situation, but their responses were disjointed. One server hurried to mop up the spill, while another argued with the upset customer, insisting it wasn't their fault. Meanwhile, the family sat quietly, visibly embarrassed by the commotion they had unintentionally caused. Michael watched the scene unfold, feeling helpless. He wanted to step in and mediate, but he hesitated, reminding himself of his cover. When the dust settled, Michael approached Lisa during a rare lull. "That was intense," he remarked casually, hoping to gauge her perspective. Lisa sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Yeah, stuff like that happens more often than you'd think. We're so understaffed that we can barely keep up with the basics, let alone handle surprises." Her words struck a chord with Michael. Back in the corporate office, he had heard similar complaints during quarterly reviews, but they always seemed abstract, distant. Now, standing shoulder to shoulder with the employees, he saw the cracks in the system firsthand. The cafe's operations weren't just inefficient, they were unsustainable. And the toll it took on the staff was evident in their weary expressions and clipped conversations. Later that afternoon, an elderly woman entered the cafeteria leaning heavily on a cane. She shuffled slowly toward the counter, scanning the menu board with obvious difficulty. No one approached her to offer assistance. Instead, the servers continued taking orders, seemingly oblivious to her struggle. Michael hesitated for a moment, before stepping forward. "Can I help you find something?" he asked gently. The woman smiled, relief washing over her face. "Oh, thank you, dear. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Could you read me the specials?" Michael obliged, describing each item in detail until she decided on a bowl of soup and a sandwich. As he guided her to a seat, he glanced around, wondering why none of the regular staff had noticed her need. When he returned to the counter, Lisa gave him a curious look. "You've got a soft spot for helping people, huh?" she teased lightly. Michael shrugged, offering a sheepish grin. "I guess so. Feels like the right thing to do." Lisa's expression softened. "It is the right thing to do," she agreed. "But when you're juggling 20 things at once, it's easy to lose sight of that. You start seeing customers as numbers instead of humans." Her honesty struck a nerve with Michael. He realized that the lack of empathy wasn't due to apathy. It was a symptom of a larger problem. The staff was stretched too thin, forced to prioritize efficiency over connection. Over the next few hours, Michael observed more closely, piecing together the puzzle. He noticed how the cashiers rarely made eye contact with customers, mechanically processing payments without engaging in conversation. He saw servers rush past empty trays, leaving them for someone else to clear because they simply didn't have time. He even overheard a heated argument between two coworkers about whose responsibility it was to restock napkins. Each observation added another layer to the growing sense of unease within him. This wasn't just about individual actions. It was about a culture shaped by systemic issues. Somewhere along the line, the company had lost sight of its core values. Customer care had become a slogan rather than a practice, and employee morale had plummeted under the weight of unrealistic expectations. During a break, Michael joined a group of coworkers in the staff lounge. They sat hunched over their meals, chatting quietly about their day. One of them, a middle-aged man named Tom, vented about the constant pressure. "We're expected to be superheroes, but we don't even get enough breaks to recharge," he grumbled. "And heaven forbid you make a mistake. You'll hear about it for weeks." Another coworker chimed in, shaking her head. "Management talks a big game about teamwork and support, but when push comes to shove, we're on our own. It's exhausting." Michael listened intently, his heart sinking. These were the voices he had failed to hear, the frustrations, fears, and hopes of the people who kept the business running. He thought about all the surveys and feedback forms he had implemented over the years, convinced they would bridge the gap between leadership and frontline workers. Yet here, sitting among them, he realized those efforts had fallen short. The communication channels existed, but they weren't effective. Employees felt unheard, undervalued, and disconnected. As the shift drew to a close, Michael reflected on the day's experiences. He had come to this cafeteria seeking insight, but what he found was far more profound, a wake-up call. The man at the corner table, the spilled water, the elderly woman, the exhausted staff. They were all pieces of a larger story, a story of broken systems, strained relationships, and unmet needs. Walking home that evening, Michael felt a mix of emotions: guilt for not recognizing these problems sooner, determination to make meaningful changes, and gratitude for the lessons he was learning. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew it was necessary. If the company was to live up to its promises, it needed to start treating its employees and customers as human beings, not statistics. Undercover or not, Michael Carter was beginning to understand what true leadership meant. It wasn't about issuing orders from a distance. It was about rolling up your sleeves, listening deeply, and doing whatever it took to create a workplace where everyone could thrive. The third day of Michael's undercover journey started like any other. Early mornings, bustling kitchens, and the relentless hum of activity. But as he tied on his apron and prepared for another shift, he couldn't shake off the growing sense of unease that had settled in his chest. The cafeteria was a well-oiled machine, churning out meals at lightning speed to keep up with demand. Yet beneath its polished surface, cracks were beginning to show, and they were impossible to ignore. By now, Michael had established a routine. He cleared tables, wiped spills, and assisted customers whenever possible. His co-workers had grown, accustomed to his presence, though they still didn't know much about him beyond his name, Mike. Lisa occasionally teased him about his willingness to help, calling him the unofficial assistant manager. It was meant as a joke, but it made Michael wonder if leadership qualities were innate, or if they could be cultivated in anyone willing to step up. That morning, however, things took a turn. A server named Sarah, who had been working nonstop since opening time, accidentally dropped an entire tray of food near the entrance. Plates shattered, sending shards of porcelain skittering across the floor. Customers gasped, stepping back to avoid injury. One man shouted angrily, complaining about the mess and demanding better service. Chaos erupted as people began voicing their frustrations, pointing fingers and looking for someone to blame. Michael rushed over to assess the situation. Sarah stood frozen, her face pale with shock and embarrassment. Before she could react, the supervisor stormed in, barking orders. "Sarah, what's going on here? You're supposed to be careful," she snapped, gesturing sharply toward the mess. I'm sorry," Sarah stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. "It was an accident. I've been running around all morning without a break. I just slipped." The supervisor rolled her eyes. "Excuses won't fix this. Clean it up and next time pay attention." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Sarah standing there, visibly shaken. Michael felt a surge of anger bubbling inside him. Watching Sarah being reprimanded so harshly, for something that wasn't entirely her fault, felt wrong. He glanced around, noticing how the rest of the staff reacted. Some looked sympathetic but said nothing, while others avoided eye contact, altogether. No one stepped forward to defend her or offer assistance. It was as if fear of authority had silenced them. Unable to stay quiet, Michael approached Sarah. "Hey, don't worry about it," he said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Accidents happen. Let me grab a broom, and we'll clean it together." Sarah blinked back tears, nodding gratefully. "Thanks, Mike. I don't know what's wrong with me today. Everything feels overwhelming." As they worked side by side to clean up the mess, Michael asked casually, "Do you get breaks during your shift?" She shook her head. "Not really. Sometimes we're told we can take 5 minutes, but when it gets busy like this, it's hard to even step away. Plus, if the supervisor sees you resting, she gives you a hard time." Her words confirmed what Michael had suspected all along. The staff was overworked, underappreciated, and afraid to speak up. It wasn't just about missed breaks or unreasonable demands. It was about a toxic environment where employees felt powerless and undervalued. Later that afternoon, tensions escalated further. During the lunch rush, 2 servers got into a heated argument over whose section should handle an incoming group of customers. Voices rose, drawing the attention of nearby diners. The supervisor intervened, scolding both parties and threatening disciplinary action if such behavior continued. Michael watched silently, feeling torn. On one hand, he understood why tempers flared. The pressure was immense, and mistakes happened, easily in such a high-stress environment. On the other hand, yelling and threats weren't effective solutions. They only added fuel to the fire, creating a cycle of resentment and frustration. During a brief lull, Michael pulled Tom aside. Tom was one of the more experienced workers, known for his calm demeanor and steady hands. "What do you think about all this?" Michael asked, gesturing vaguely at the chaos around them. Tom sighed, leaning against the counter. "It's always like this. Management sets these crazy targets, expecting us to meet them no matter what. If we fall short, we catch hell. But If we complain, we're told we're not team players. Honestly, I love this job most days, but lately it's been wearing me down. Michael nodded thoughtfully. Have you ever tried bringing these concerns to higher-ups? Tom gave a bitter laugh. Yeah, right, we've sent feedback forms, attended meetings, even talked to HR. Nothing changes. At the end of the day, they care more about numbers than people. This exchange hit Michael hard. Back in the corporate office, he prided himself on being approachable and open-minded. He encouraged employees to share their thoughts and promised to address their concerns. Yet here in the trenches, those promises seemed hollow. The disconnect between leadership and frontline workers was staggering. As the day wore on, Michael found himself reflecting on the concept of empathy, not just toward customers but also among colleagues. He noticed how some employees went out of their way to support each other, sharing tips, covering shifts, or offering words of encouragement. These small acts of kindness stood out like bright spots in an otherwise dim landscape. They reminded him that despite the challenges, humanity still existed within the walls of the cafeteria. But kindness alone wasn't enough to fix the systemic issues plaguing the workplace. Something bigger needed to change, a cultural shift that prioritized respect, communication, and mutual support. And Michael knew that change had to start from the top. That evening, after clocking out, Michael lingered in the parking lot, staring at the building. For 3 days, he had immersed himself in the world of his employees, experiencing firsthand the joys and struggles of their daily lives. He had seen moments of triumph and glimpses of hope, but also instances of neglect, exhaustion, and disillusionment. Undercover or not, Michael Carter was beginning to understand the weight of his responsibility. As CEO, he held the power to transform the company's culture, to create an environment where employees felt valued, empowered, and motivated to provide exceptional service. The question was no longer if he would act, but how. The answers wouldn't come overnight, but Michael was determined to find them. For now, he returned home, his mind buzzing with ideas and plans. Tomorrow was another day, and he intended to make the most of it, listening, learning, and laying the groundwork for meaningful change. The 4th day of Michael's undercover journey began with a heavy weight pressing on his chest. The events of the past 3 days had left him emotionally drained, yet more determined than ever to uncover the root causes of the problems plaguing the cafeteria. He knew that today would be critical, not just for observing but for testing whether small actions could make a difference in such a chaotic environment. As he entered the bustling kitchen, the usual symphony of clattering dishes, sizzling pans, and hurried footsteps greeted him. The supervisor handed him his tray with a curt nod, reminding him of the tasks ahead. "We're expecting a big crowd today," she warned. "Stay sharp." Michael nodded, though his mind was already racing with thoughts of how he might step up and bring some order to the chaos. By mid-morning, the cafeteria was flooded with customers. Shoppers, tourists, and office workers packed the space, creating long lines at the counters and leaving behind a trail of dirty trays and spilled drinks. The staff moved like robots, their faces tense with exhaustion. Servers darted between tables, their arms laden with plates, while cashiers punched numbers into registers without pausing to breathe. It was clear that the team was stretched to its limits, and then some. Amidst the frenzy, another incident unfolded that tested everyone's patience. A toddler seated with her parents knocked over a cup of juice, drenching the floor beneath their table. Before anyone could react, a man walking by slipped on the sticky surface, landing hard on his backside. His loud groan drew immediate attention, and soon angry murmurs spread through the room. "Can someone clean this up?" the man shouted, wincing as he struggled to stand. "This is ridiculous." The staff froze, unsure who should take responsibility. One server glanced nervously at the supervisor, who was busy dealing with an irate customer at the counter. Another muttered under her breath, "Not my section." Meanwhile, the family whose child caused the spill looked mortified, apologizing profusely but unable to do much else. Michael felt a surge of frustration. This wasn't just bad luck. It was a symptom of deeper issues. The lack of coordination, the absence of clear leadership during crises, and the overwhelming workload were all contributing to moments like this. Without hesitation, he grabbed a mop and bucket from the supply closet and headed toward the scene. "I've got this," he said firmly, meeting the eyes of the fallen man. "Are you okay? Do you need help getting up?" The man hesitated, then accepted Michael's outstretched hand. "Thanks," he muttered gruffly. "But seriously, this place needs better management." Michael didn't argue. Instead, he focused on cleaning up the mess quickly and efficiently, ensuring no one else would slip. As he worked, he noticed Lisa watching him from across the room. She gave him a small, approving smile before turning back to her duties. When the situation was under control, Michael pulled Lisa aside during a rare lull. "Why didn't anyone else step in?" he asked quietly. She shrugged, looking weary. "It's not that we don't care, it's just that when things get this crazy, people shut down. We're so used to being told what to do that we forget how to think for ourselves. And honestly, most of us are too scared of getting yelled at if we make a mistake." Her words struck a nerve. Michael realized that fear of punishment, of failure, of stepping out of line, was paralyzing the staff. It wasn't just about individual mistakes. It was about a culture that discouraged initiative and punished vulnerability. Later that afternoon, tensions reached a breaking point. A young waitress named Emma, who had been working tirelessly since early morning, accidentally served the wrong order to a customer. When the man discovered the error, he erupted in anger, demanding to see a manager. The supervisor arrived promptly, berating Emma in front of everyone. "You can't even get a simple order right," she snapped, her voice cutting through the noise of the cafeteria. "What am I supposed to do with you?" Emma's face turned red, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, clutching her notepad tightly. "It won't happen again." Michael clenched his fists, barely containing his rage. Watching Emma crumble under the weight of public humiliation felt unbearable. He wanted to intervene, to defend her, but he held back, knowing it would blow his cover. Instead, he approached her later during a break, offering a sympathetic ear. "That wasn't fair," he said gently. "Everyone makes mistakes. You shouldn't have been treated like that." Emma sniffled, wiping her eyes. "I know I messed up, but she didn't have to embarrass me in front of everyone. It's like, no matter how hard I try, it's never enough." Her words echoed what Michael had heard repeatedly from other employees, that their efforts went unnoticed, their struggles dismissed, and their humanity ignored. It wasn't just about one bad supervisor or one stressful shift. It was about a systemic failure to recognize and support the people who kept the business running. That evening, after closing time, Michael joined the team in the break room. The atmosphere was somber, the energy drained from hours of relentless work. People sat slumped in chairs, staring blankly at the walls or scrolling through their phones. No one spoke much, and the silence was deafening. Unable to stay quiet any longer, Michael cleared his throat. "Hey everyone," he began hesitantly. "I just wanted to say, I've been here for a few days now and I've seen how hard you all work. Seriously, it's impressive. But I've also noticed how tough things can get sometimes, how overwhelming it feels when there's no break, no support, and no one listening." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. For a moment, Michael wondered if he had overstepped. But then Tom nodded slowly. "He's right," Tom said, his voice low. "We're doing our best, but it's like we're fighting an uphill battle every single day, and no one seems to care." Others chimed in, sharing their frustrations. Sarah talked about the lack of breaks. Lisa mentioned the unrealistic targets, and Emma recounted the sting of constant criticism. Each story painted a picture of a workplace where morale was crumbling under the weight of unmet expectations. Michael listened intently, his heart aching with guilt and resolve. These weren't just complaints, they were cries for help. As CEO, he had the power to address these issues, to create a workplace where employees felt valued and supported. But change wouldn't come overnight. It would require trust, transparency, and a willingness to listen. Before leaving for the night, Michael made a silent promise to himself and to the team. Tomorrow, he would reveal his true identity. He would tell them who he really was and share his plan to fix the broken system. More importantly, he would assure them that their voices mattered, that together they could build something better. As he walked home, Michael felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him: exhaustion from the long shifts, sadness from witnessing the struggles of his employees, and determination to make things right. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew it was worth it. Because at the end of the day, a company wasn't defined by its profits or its slogans, it was defined by the people who brought it to life, and Michael Carter was ready to fight for those people. The final day of Michael's undercover journey arrived, and with it came a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He had spent 4 days living the life of an ordinary cafeteria worker, experiencing firsthand the joys, frustrations, and struggles of his employees. Now, as he prepared to reveal his true identity, he felt a deep sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about ending his experiment. It was about taking action, making promises, and proving that change was possible. As he walked into the cafeteria that morning, the familiar chaos greeted him once again. The air smelled of freshly brewed coffee and toasted bread, and the sound of clattering dishes filled the room. Servers rushed past him balancing trays laden with food, while cashiers called out order numbers over the din. For a moment, Michael paused, taking it all in. These were the people who kept the business running, the backbone of the company, and yet for so long they had been invisible to him. Today, however, would be different. Today, Michael decided to lead by example. Instead of sticking to his usual tasks, he stepped into a more active role, coordinating efforts and offering guidance wherever needed. When a new batch of customers flooded in during breakfast hour, he quickly organized the staff, assigning specific roles to each person. Lisa, you handle the counter orders. Tom, focus on clearing tables. Sarah, assist with refills and spills. He instructed calmly but firmly. At first, the team hesitated, unsure why Mike, a temp, was suddenly giving orders. But as they followed his lead, something remarkable happened. The workflow became smoother, the lines shorter, and the mood lighter. Employees moved with purpose, knowing exactly what was expected of them. Customers noticed the difference too, smiling as their orders arrived promptly and accurately. During a brief lull, Lisa approached Michael with a grin. "You've got a knack for this, Mike," she teased. "Maybe you should apply for a permanent position." Michael chuckled, feeling a pang of nervousness. In a few hours, she and everyone else would know the truth. Would they see him as a leader willing to roll up his sleeves or as a boss playing games? He pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. Later that afternoon, another crisis arose. A malfunctioning ice machine caused water to leak onto the floor, creating a hazardous situation. Customers began complaining, and some even threatened to leave without paying. Once again, Michael sprang into action, grabbing mops and buckets while directing others to block off the affected area. Within minutes, the problem was contained, and operations resumed smoothly. When the shift ended, Michael gathered the team in the break room. His heart pounded as he stood before them, clutching his cap in one hand. For a moment, he simply looked at their faces, young and old, tired but resilient. They deserved honesty, respect, and recognition for their hard work. "Listen up, everyone," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "There's something I need to tell you. My name isn't Mike. I'm Michael Carter, the CEO of this company." A stunned silence fell over the room. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and whispers rippled through the group. Some looked shocked, others skeptical, but all were curious. Michael removed his cap completely, revealing his face fully. "I came here undercover because I wanted to understand what it's like to work on the front lines, to see how our policies and practices affect you every day. What I've learned has been eye-opening and heartbreaking." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then, he continued, his tone sincere and heartfelt. "I've seen how hard you work, how much you care, and how little support you receive in return. I've heard your frustrations about understaffing, lack of breaks, and unrealistic targets. And I've witnessed moments where fear and exhaustion, have overshadowed empathy and teamwork. That stops now. The room remained silent, but Michael could feel the tension easing slightly. Encouraged, he outlined concrete steps he planned to take. First, we're hiring additional staff to ease the workload. No one should have to juggle 20 things at once or skip breaks just to keep up. Second, we're revising our policies to ensure fair treatment for everyone. Mistakes will happen, and when they do, we'll address them constructively, not with public humiliation. Third, we're implementing mandatory training programs focused on empathy, communication, and customer service. These aren't optional. They're essential. He took a deep breath, meeting each employee's gaze. But most importantly, I want to create open channels for communication. You've told me repeatedly that your voices go unheard. From today onward, that changes. I'll hold monthly town hall meetings where anyone can share concerns or suggestions directly with me. Your feedback matters. It always has, but now we'll make sure it leads to real action. The team erupted into applause, their initial shock giving way to hope. Tom stood up, shaking his head in disbelief. I never thought I'd say this, but thank you. We've needed this for a long time. Sarah nodded tearfully. It means a lot to hear you say these things. Just knowing someone is listening makes a difference. Michael smiled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. For years, he had led the company from behind a desk, relying on reports and presentations to guide his decisions. Now, standing among his employees, he realized how disconnected he had been from the reality of their daily lives. Going undercover hadn't just exposed flaws. It had reignited his passion for leadership and reminded him of the human element at the heart of every business. After the meeting, Michael stayed behind to speak with individual employees, answering questions and gathering more insights. Lisa thanked him for stepping in during tough situations, while Emma expressed relief that her mistakes wouldn't define her future. Even the supervisor, who had often clashed with the staff, admitted that the current system was unsustainable and welcomed the proposed changes. As Michael left the cafeteria that evening, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Implementing reforms would require time, effort, and collaboration, but he was ready. He knew that meaningful change didn't happen overnight, but he also knew that small, consistent actions could transform a workplace. That night, as he reflected on the week's events, Michael jotted down notes for his upcoming board meeting. He planned to present not just statistics and strategies, but stories. The story of Sarah struggling under pressure, of Emma being humiliated publicly, and of Lisa fighting tirelessly to provide good service despite overwhelming odds. These stories mattered because they represented the soul of the company. Undercover or not, Michael Carter had discovered something invaluable. Leadership wasn't about authority or titles. It was about connection. It was about seeing people, hearing their voices, and empowering them to succeed. And though the road ahead would be challenging, he was confident that together they could build a workplace where everyone thrived. For the first time in years, Michael slept soundly, dreaming not of profits or growth charts, but of smiles, laughter, and shared victories. Because at the end of the day, success wasn't measured by numbers. It was measured by the lives touched along the way.